Welcome to HirewithEve.ai podcast. HirewithEve.ai is an AI tool to pre-screen candidates and accurately identify their skills to help you cut down your hiring time by 90%. In this podcast series, we interview and have in-depth conversations with global HR leaders across industries and geographies to understand current HR trends, leadership challenges, workforce plannings, and many more interesting topics. So with that, let's dive into today's conversation. Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Rahul Abhisek, the founder of HirewithEve.ai. And for today's episode, I have a very special guest with us, Aanchal Arora. Aanchal is the co-founder of All Things Talent. She has an extensive experience and expertise within the domain of HR and has had previous leadership roles such as Chief Human Resource Officer at Servion Global Solutions, as well as Director of Human Resource at Shadowfax. So, Aanchal, welcome to today's episode. With that, it would be great to hear a bit more about yourself in your own words.
Thanks so much, Rahul, for having me here. So, hi to all your viewers. Before I start, just a quick check. Am I audible, visible?
Yeah.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So good. Thanks for having me here. I'll keep my introduction quick, and I think you'll get to know me more through the course of this podcast. I have been in the talent and the HR and talent management space for about 15 years, or 17 years. Feel old suddenly. Been very fortunate to have worked in organizations, all scales and phases, in their lives. So starting from a company, where I was a 25th employee, a company literally, starting out of a room smaller than the one I'm sitting in right now, to organizations that were family businesses, founder-led businesses, private equity getting acquired, so on and so forth, including public companies. So I've seen like the full spectrum in the people ops space. Been very fortunate, have had a great journey, been an entrepreneur in the same space for about 5 years. And recently co-founded this organization called All Things Talent with Mitasha. She's of course not here. And very, very new, very exciting times for us. We started All Things Talent with a goal to revolutionize the way people ops and leadership development are approached in startups and scale-ups. So very exciting times for us, since we are a startup ourselves and hoping to do things right ourselves too. But right now we have we do some great work with very exciting work with a lot of startups, a lot of scale-ups, some pre-IPO companies, some companies that have just raised money, so on and so forth. A lot of work in the space of fractional HR talent that we provide, and leadership development. So that's what our forte is, and very excited to talk to you, Rahul. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about my experiences and my thoughts and views through the course of the podcast.
Of course. Great to be talking to a fellow founder, and wish you a very exciting journey. So obviously, I mean, what I myself and the viewers would be interested to know is what led you to start your company, All Things Talent.
Okay. So for this, I'm going to have to go back in time a little to first tell you why did I first become an entrepreneur. I had been in the corporate space, like I mentioned, right, with different phases and scales of organizations doing various things for about almost, I would say, 13, 14 years back then, when I decided it was time. I was done, exhausted, tired of working for corporates, primarily because having worked in organizations that was so different, I figured my heart lied in working for startups and mid-sized companies, primarily because I felt that they are the ones who needed proper HR, support the best. When I say HR, I mean people ops, right? And by that, I don't mean making your offer letters. I don't mean just sourcing people. I mean true blue strategic HR inputs, which I felt they were completely lacking, because either that was not available, that kind of talent in people ops, or it was extremely expensive and unaffordable. And that's how I got into the entrepreneurial world and wanted to do my erstwhile organization called HRLI. Having said that, I was very clear that I myself needed to figure out what it takes to build a company like that for the first few years, right? So I kept it very small, kept it like a boutique consulting firm, mostly did what I did through word of mouth, But when I thought, okay, I was ready to scale this up and go to the next level, serendipitously happened to meet Mitasha, who's my co-founder, at the same time. And that's how All Things Talent was born. Both of us had the same mission, saying, how do we change, revolutionize the way startups and scale-ups work in the country? And how do we let go of that toxic work culture that we continue to talk about, and the people problems and the challenges that we continue to talk about? So that's really, I think, one conversation led to the other, and somehow All Things Talent was born. Although Natasha and I had met a few years back, and we remembered each other because our thoughts had really aligned even then, and it's hard to find people somehow in the space of HR who you sort of get to share your views with, and you align so much. So we happened to serendipitously meet again, and yeah, one thing led to the other, like I said, and that's how All Things Talent was born.
That's great. That's great. That's a good story. That's a good story. So having worked in the domain for so long, and especially in the various aspect of talent acquisition and the whole cycle of HR that you worked on, I often ask our guests and take their perspective in what they think specifically is one of the superpowers that HR as a domain brings to an organization, and at the same time, what would you think are their weaknesses?
Before I get to that, I think fundamentally there is one belief that I have, that as we progress further with the onset of new generations, new age modern organizations, this whole concept of HR, the way we know today, I think will get bleaker and bleaker. And I'm not saying HR is not needed or people ops is not needed. All I'm saying is I don't know if the way it runs today, one head of HR, one this, one that, will continue, right? And that is something for us to figure out. But in the light of your question, if one superpower that anyone who has people ops responsibilities, can be a CEO today too, right? Should have, I think that is the empathy radar. I think that is extremely crucial, especially given the fact that we have so many different generations working together today. And we are struggling working with various generations. We are stigmatizing various generations. So I think that little bit of empathy radar would be an HR or people ops person superpower, and hopefully we can spread it across the organization.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then on the flip side, what would you say are their core weaknesses that you feel, if improved, can again have a big impact on the overall domain?
I'm going to laugh and just make it silly and say, hey, you know what? Rangoli would be that kryptonite that you're talking about. Those Rangoli competitions, but okay. On a serious note, I think HR or no HR, any professional for that matter, for me, the pet peeve is those endless meetings without a purpose, without knowing where we are going. So whether it's HR or any other function, please, if it's an email, please let it be an email. Don't let there be endless meetings. So I think that is every professional's kryptonite. So yeah. So superpower for HR would be an empathy radar. Kryptonite would be just doing your Rangoli competitions.
Right.
And on a more serious note, endless meetings without a purpose.
Okay. I mean, that's something good for people and viewers to make a note of. Now, now that you've worked on the industry of almost 2 decades, what are some of the current times trends that you have seen very strongly when you talk to your potential customers and in your own experience?
Trends like where? Like in this field of HR or people ops?
Yeah, within the domain of HR.
I think it's just changing. It's continuing to change. It's changed a lot. There used to be a time, I think, especially when we worked in IT companies, where everything was very process driven, one policy that met everybody, step 1, step 2, step 3, very, very structured way of doing things. I think today, people ops has its own challenges, right? And those are the trends that I'm seeing. First and foremost, and I'm going to harp upon it, I think, a fair bit, is the change in workforce mix. I think that is a huge change, and which is basically forcing people to, wake up and make some changes, right? Whether it's the onset of Gen Z. And for me, that is also a reflection in all the chaos that we hear about it. Maybe the inability of a lot of founders, older generations, to even adapt to the coming changes. Second, I think next, and we just can't, turn away from that, is the onset of AI. I think that's changed everything, right? So I think that is like a big thing. Third, and very importantly, for that matter, is just how social media has changed all of us over the last few years. I think has been like another trend, which even as an organization, you can't let go, right? What you are doing, that fear of, something getting recorded, being posted on social media, the quick reviews, quick to bash people around. I think those are 2, 3 things that have really changed the way even people ops has changed. So for me, those are some of the big trends. Of course, there are many for that matter.
Of course, of course. So now you mentioned the aspect of the mix of generations that are now working together. Let's address that aspect from a talent acquisition point of view. What have you observed in terms of acquiring this new generation of talent? What kind of, I would say, challenges or new practices that you have encountered to then, attract and retain the new generation?
I think before I answer any of that to do with talent acquisition, it's extremely important for us to really understand who is this generation? Why is there so much noise about it, right? First and foremost, I truly believe there's so much noise and even stigma around Gen Z and this and that and the entitlement that we keep talking about because there's social media. When millennials came in to the workforce, there was no social media to continue to harp upon it, stigmatize what we bring and what we bring not. By the way, I find it very unfair on Gen Z. Having said that, let's understand what this generation is a product of. This is a generation that grew up in the age of social media. They grew up with a phone in their hand, right?
Yeah.
One of the things, by the way. Now, what does that do to a person? As kids, like the core of who they are as a person, wanted validation from the likes, from the reshares, from the comments, so on and so forth, right? So is that the best thing we've done to the generation? No. But we are the ones as millennials who created this world of social media, for heaven's sake, right? And they are the ones who are adopters. They are the ones who we are seeing all the impact on. So this is a generation that was driven by validation. This was a generation that got upset by something being told otherwise. This is a generation for reasons, similar reasons, and also by the way, very protected generations at home, right?
Yeah.
Because the generations prior were better, they were doing better financially, etc., and very protected generation. So this is a generation that gets a lot of anxiety and stuff like that, and rightly so, right? The fact for me is, and that's what I keep telling all my clients that I work with, instead of cribbing and talking about the fact that Gen Z has problems, let's understand why do they have what we call problems today, right? And what is it that we can do about it? By the way, this generation is extremely creative. Excuse me. This generation is extremely creative. They're very, very good with a lot of things, especially use of social media, adoption of new technology, adoption of AI, so on and so forth. They're very, very responsible when it comes to sustainability, social responsibilities, etc. So I don't want us to look away from those just because that generation refuses to work the donkey hours that we worked in when we started working, right? So I think to answer your question now, I think fundamentally, first and foremost, let's all put in some effort and understand what this generation is, who they are, why they are the way they are, and then let's start working with them. The fact is that we have no choice. They are the future of work, whether we like it or not, for each of our organizations, for your organization, for mine, and for the clients that we work for and work with. So Gen Z is the future. There are no two ways about it. They are not as bad as it is made out to be. I see this newspaper clipping saying, hey, Gen Z employee did this. You know what? An employee did this. It could have been any other generation and you would have skipped that as a headline, right? So that is one. Having said that, now what is changing in the workplace, whether it comes to acquisition, whether it comes to engaging and developing them, so on and so forth. What it means is that first and foremost, you need to have really strong leadership who is ready to manage Gen Z, right? And sometimes organizations need to ask, is it the lack of leadership that is causing all the trouble, or is it the Gen Z, right? So first and foremost, strong leadership. So I really, really encourage organizations to invest in leadership development, right? If I'm not mistaken, I was going through some numbers the other day. 5% of the companies invest in development across all levels of leadership, which is a terrible number. So first thing is, please invest in leadership development so your leaders are better equipped and ready to work with this generation. Second, please note that one size fits all does not work. Definitely doesn't work with this organization. Please make your policies very, very adaptive, agile, and something that are flexible, right? Third, understand the needs of this organization. This organization is definitely, driven by a lot of purpose. This generation is definitely someone who's looking for flexibility, right? They do want to take care of their mental health more, and maybe their needs are more than what we are used to, or maybe we're just used to abusing ourselves, different ways of looking at it. So these are some of the things that I believe that organizations need to start adapting in their practices. And also, finally, just invest in them through coaching, mentoring, development. And I have seen some of those people doing wonders, by the way, right? Once you invest in them through various means. So I think with Gen Z, a lot changes. I'm hoping that we stop stigmatizing Gen Z in the coming days. It's very, very hard to see that conversation every now and then on LinkedIn and various social media platforms.
Okay, of course, makes sense, and thank you for that. So then, now that we know that this is the new generation that is now joining the workforce, then for your own startup, how have you gone about or think about, building startup teams and hiring? What would be some of your core learnings there?
I have worked with startups for the last 10 years, and I might have worked in various capacities, different capacities, not necessarily as head of HR, sometimes as a consultant, sometimes as a learning and development professional, or different capacities in about 35, 40 startups, maybe, right? Maybe more, in different capacities, of course. So I'll share with you some of the learnings which I feel that startups should keep in mind as they start making their teams, right? First and foremost, if you're an early stage startup, please, anybody who you get in must be hands-on. You can't have hands-off leaders. And I'm not saying hands-off leaders are not the right professionals. All I'm saying is they're probably not best suited for your organization. Get somebody who's hands-on, who can work with your teams and get things done, right? So hands-off leaders is one learning. Hands-on leaders, sorry, is one learning, right? Second is get people who get things done. What do I mean by that? Very often we see, because startups typically are beaming with ideas, one thing every day, and we'll see typically people start something and then not seeing it through, right? So please get people who don't need a lot of follow-up, who have this innate ability to see things through. Don't go by just the credentials and the fancy degree necessarily. You need people who will take something up and get things done, right? So that is like the second learning that I have. The third is, please spend and invest energy and time on hiring people. Don't just hire people thinking, you know what, let me hire them today, let me get my work done, and I'll fire them later. Please invest time in figuring out if that person is the right fit for you. Please have your hiring criteria right, and make sure that anybody you hire fits into that. So I think these are some of the very, very basic learnings. But unfortunately, I have seen that a lot of times people tend to miss them for some reason, right? So those, and by the way, one more criteria, and I think that's for the founders themselves too. And a lot of times I've seen that founders themselves lack it, is the clarity of thought. If you're able to hire your first 5 members who have extreme clarity of thought, who have decluttered thought process, I think that goes a long way. Because otherwise there is so much chaos as is, right, in startup world, things changing, things falling, things coming in, investor pressure, right, all of that. But if you have people who have that clarity of thought, who know exactly what they need to get things done, that is a game changer. So I think these are some of the things I would say. So hands-on leader, people who have the ability to work and build a team, people who have the ability to get things done, right, and see them through the finish, and of course, people who have a very, very clear thought process.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that makes a lot of sense. So what would be on the flip side, then things that a founder shouldn't do when then building a team?
I'm actually going to flip everything that I said. I just realized with this question. But any which ways, I think the mistakes that people do, it's exactly opposite of what I already said when I say you have your hiring criteria. But what really happens, right, when you're hiring people, is very often you have people who are able to impact us and our biases creep in, right? For example, somebody who speaks really well. I know I need to hire for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 criteria. I know that. But when I meet somebody, I'm so impressed, either with their English or where they've been, or the Harvard, or the Oxford, or the IIM, or the IIT, that I forget what I was hiring for. So it's okay to hire degrees. It's okay to hire people with great everything else. But please don't let go of, your hiring criteria per se. Especially things like halo effect, etc. come in. That's one big mistake. Second, oftentimes we land up hiring leaders from large organizations, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying please make sure that leader can actually get their hands dirty and work with the team. More than anything else, you will probably have a person who's paid a very fat salary in all likelihood, right? And the team's just not able to relate to that person because they see him or her doing absolutely no work, right? So in the initial stages of your startup, when you're making your team, please ensure people are able to get their hands dirty. So that is a mistake very, very often that people make. Um, that's the second mistake. I think third mistake, it's not a hiring mistake, but it's a general people ops issue, is forgetting that when you start making your teams, especially you as founders or you as the core team, whoever that might be, are the culture of the organization. And people don't realize that. They think culture starts when the company is 8 people, 10 people. It doesn't work like that. So your beliefs, your way of working, whether you like it or not, is the culture of the organization. So please behave as you would want your future teams to behave. Act like, your life depends on it, because it does. So don't forget the cultural aspect of it from day one of your organization. Even when you don't have teams, you are still setting in a culture and the way of working for the organization.
Yeah. Makes sense. So, Achal, now we're coming to an end of our podcast. And one of the final questions I have for you is, what would be your advice to the workforce, the young generation who are going to join, start their careers for them?
So workforce that's going to join and start their career, I would first want to let them know that the people who you're going to work with are going to take time to adapt to your styles. So it is a request to all the workforce that's going to come in to also adapt, have patience, wait, and allow multiple generations right now in the workforce to learn and live with each other, really. So I think that would be one. Second, and this is for everyone, would be to really follow what the trends are. A lot of people ask me if AI is going to replace uh, jobs, etc. I don't think so. But people who use AI or who use whatever is latest for that matter, right, in terms of technology or wherever else the world is going, they will replace your jobs. So if you are not using if you're not keeping yourself abreast with what's happening in the world, you are going to miss out. And the third would be, please try to be forever learners, right? I am 17, 18 years into my career. I continue to learn something or the other. Just a couple of years back, I finished my executive education from Wharton. Before that, I was doing some certifications, right? Now I keep myself abreast through podcasts, newsletters, etc. Please continue to learn. Never feel that, at no point in time should you feel that you know it all. And please go beyond your domain. I'm an HR professional, but all my learnings of where the world is going, where they're not going, comes from, let's say, product influencers or product people, right? Because I just find the kind of value that they're able to add or perspective they're able to add like amazing, right? So Lenny's podcast is my favorite podcast to listen to, or John Cutler is the person I would follow, right? And so many others. So please look beyond your domain. You can be a techie, you can be an HR person, you can be a marketing professional. Please don't stick to that. Learn beyond your domain, and that's what will really propel you forward. So yeah, those are some of my inputs for.
Those are definitely fantastic advices, and I really hope the young generation listening to the episode actually takes action on those. So
I hope so.
perfect. So Aanchal, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you the best of the day. And thank you.
Thank you for having me, Rahul. I wish you and your organization all the very best, and it was lovely to talk to you.
Same.